this off.
Oh, we're live. All right. The Lord be with you. Ashley, if you want their attention, that's what you say in our church. Works better than whistling or anything.
Love it, love it.
I am here to introduce our adult forum speaker for today. This is Ashley Hines, who is an incredibly talented and well-educated person that we are really privileged to have come with us today to speak with us on being an ally. So you're going to tell us what that means. It's kind of a new concept. Ashley is an advocate, strategist, and entrepreneur dedicated to equipping communities to advance equity and create spaces where everyone is safe, valued, and respected. She is currently the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for Advocate Aurora Health. Big job. Oh my gosh. She's only been there a few months.
I'm on the 5th month.
5 months.
Yeah.
And before that, she was Outreach Program Manager for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at the Medical College of Wisconsin. Her career journey has, even though she's so young, has been really distinguished. She is a native of Milwaukee and earned her bachelor's degree from UW-Madison, and with lots of distinctions. And she recently, just this past year, became a Harvard Business School Young American Leader identified. And did you get to travel, or was that all on Zoom?
So, because of COVID, no. But
Yeah.
We're hoping they give us a rain check, so.
All right. Ashley is also a mother and a wife, in addition to all of that, and a business owner. And so maybe she'll tell us about some of that as she goes. So without further ado, let me introduce you to your speaker today, Ashley Hines.
Well, good morning, Christ Church. Can you hear me okay? Awesome, awesome. Please let me know if that changes at any time. Thank you so much, Reverend Trainer. It has been a pleasure to work with you and the leadership team of BCT. And just good morning to everyone. I had an amazing time during your service. I was missing my own, so it was wonderful to have that filled up this morning. And I'm also just delighted to be here in this space with you all and to know that you have ongoing and deliberate commitment to this work and to this learning. It is absolutely essential to our own D&I journeys, everyone's D&I journey. And I'm just thrilled to see it. So thank you for that. I hope that I say even just one thing today that will inform and inspire you. I look forward to learning with you as well. I find that even though I've been in this space for over a decade now, I learn something every time I am in an environment like this, so I am open to learn. I will leave time for questions at the end. I have about 45 minutes, but please stop me at any time. It is actually my preferred style to have questions, comments throughout. I prefer dialogue, so at any time you can stop me. All right, are we ready? Great, great, great. Dear white classmates, I'm new here. I came from a school about 15 minutes away from Brown Deer. It's called Bruce Elementary School. I loved Bruce. Let's see if my slide deck will go. I loved Bruce. I went to Bruce for 1st grade and 2nd grade, and then this year, my principal told my parents that Bruce School could no longer support me. He said I was learning too fast and I would get bored. So my parents had to find a new school for me. They found the 220 program. Basically, Black kids who live in Milwaukee can go to white schools in the suburbs. So here I am. I'm very scared, but I'm excited. Can I play with you? So this I kind of wrote as a reflection. I never lived in Brown Deer. However, I attended the Brown Deer School District from 3rd grade all the way through 12th grade graduation. The Chapter 220 program, if you're not familiar, it ended about 6 years ago, and it was replaced by open enrollment. That is an entirely different topic for another day. But Chapter 220 changed my life. So at its peak in like the late 80s, the early 90s, about 6,000 minority students and 1,000 white students participated. The program opens seats for students of color to attend well-resourced schools in predominantly white neighborhoods. Why? It's a very complicated question. And at the time, there were lawsuits that uncovered redlining and discriminatory practices in housing. But this program in particular also was backed by substantial research that demonstrates that all kids do better in integrated and diverse schools. So we're all on the same page. I'm going to share some definitions throughout our time today to accomplish our outcomes that I know, that very ambitious outcomes that I've identified for today. But so we're all on the same page. Very simply, diversity is bringing different identities together. We're very complex people, all of us. We all have intersectionalities of our diversity. Scholars frame diversity in dimensions. I've shown some above on the screen. So it includes some that are more obvious or not obvious: our gender, our race, our ethnicity, our sexual orientation, our language, culture, religion, our mental and physical abilities, our class, age, immigration status, you name it. We are all a bundle of many differences. And there are so many components of our identities that we cannot see, our hidden identities. Brown Deer was a super culture shock for me. Bruce School was pretty well mostly black, and then kind of went into an environment with just a very quick switch. And so I felt alone pretty quickly, but eventually I realized that most people actually welcomed me and wanted my difference there. I can recall in elementary school, we do these like cultural celebrations. Not much sticks out for me during that time, like very clearly, but I can remember being in our gym and experiencing different identity groups, their language, their culture, and having a deep respect for that difference. Not only having people say you're welcome, but actually showing you that you're welcome by learning more about who you are. It means so much, especially to groups that have been historically excluded. At the time, I had no idea about biases. Of course, because of my profession, I've learned a lot about language in this space. But now I know that a bias is an evaluation or belief. Just quite frankly, it can be positive, it can be negative, it can be neutral. But we can also unconsciously act out of these biases. You've heard unconscious bias or implicit bias, maybe. When we may consciously actually believe something different. I've had it happen to myself where I'm like, I know I don't believe this, but I'm moving out of this space, right? So our brain at any given moment is encountering 11 million pieces of data. That's all the sensory overload, everything we're hearing, we're feeling, things we're not even conscious about, because we can actually only process 40 to 50 bits of that information. So we're making really quick decisions, right? We're doing things without thinking. Looking back, I realized that some of the kids and even my own self acted out of those biases. When I got to the school, I told you I felt alone. I quickly looked for people who looked like me and found them as a safety net. It was only later that I learned that I shouldn't fear the unknown, and I started to get to know people who look different than me. And I, over the years, of course, developed really amazing relationships with students from all different backgrounds. You see it on the screen, but there are some ways that we can mitigate bias. We can push against that natural and kind of unconscious behavior. The first thing that I'd like to say is don't ignore difference. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but I've heard so much that I'm colorblind, right? And I always tell people, no, that is not it. We want to see color, we want you to see it, and we want you to value those differences, right? And being curious and asking questions out of an authentic space that honors and respects people and brings dignity to who they are. Finding opportunities to expand your knowledge. Obviously, you're here today. You all have made a commitment to doing this, but continuing on that journey. there's a TED Talk. I'm really obsessed with TED Talks. I came out of academics, so if you ever want to talk TED Talks, let me know. But there's a TED Talk called The Danger of a Single Story, and in it, the speaker talks about how if we only have one stereotype, one image of a group, how completely awful that is to our life, right? That we live out those stereotypes each and every day. And so she begs us to get to know different people. And Vernai Myers in her TED Talk also talks about running towards our biases. So you don't know something about a group and you can freeze and feel guilty or about your thoughts. The goal is to actually push against that and to find a way to connect. She talks about imagining counter stereotypes. You know, that if the only thing you see of a black man is what's on TV, boy, oh boy, right? So we have to replace what can be those stereotypes and those images and challenging our assumptions. So in middle school, I met some pretty amazing black teachers. So I actually don't remember having any black teachers in elementary, but when I went to middle school, I met some amazing black teachers, some of which that are still there right now. I have a nephew that is in K4 at Brown Deer and has one of my teachers that I had many, many years ago now. But seeing those teachers really allowed me to show up even more as myself, and they welcomed me into an environment, of course, but it wasn't exactly designed for me, right? So seeing those teachers really helped me to learn about representation. In high school, so I'll go quickly through this next part, but in high school, I continued to be a high-achieving student. I got a good GPA. I was pretty much, it's strange to look back now because I had a 4.0 and I was probably 20 in my class. I don't know how that works, but clearly there were people who were even more. But I earned membership into the National Honor Society. I participated in student council, debate, school paper. I mean, literally anything they gave us, I tried to do. One of the most memorable moments for me, though, was actually planning a Black History program my senior year. And that was the first time I had done it in all of high school. And even to this day, it brings me immense pride to celebrate my culture among my peers. Brown Deer also afforded me an opportunity to participate in a competitive internship program through Johnson Controls. So each summer I would go to Johnson Controls. We learned about business and engineering and marketing. And I also, at that time, got exposed to corporate diversity. And you know, you don't know what you're learning at the time. Now looking back, I'm like, wow, that was really impactful. But their African American Affinity Network really championed our internship program. I'd also go on to lead at the Greater Milwaukee Foundation's Youth Advisory Council, where I supported youth who were doing service projects in the community. It was really cool to give out money to my peers who were trying to make our community better, and that's a huge part of my background. And then I also participated in like anything Milwaukee had to offer for college readiness. I don't know how my parents got us around. Looking back, now that I have 2 kids, I'm like, oh my gosh, how did they do this? But, and I volunteered at my church, right? And other organizations that I cared about. And I had a job too. I don't know how it happened. Reverend Trainer was asking me before, when do I sleep? And I don't know. You took my spot, a classmate said, in response to hearing the news that I was accepted into the freshman class at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I sat stunned. I took her spot? What does that even mean? I didn't think there were any spots. So at the time, I didn't understand the real meaning of these words, but over a decade later, it now makes sense. And these are actually just pictures. So, dear white students, I've worked really hard to get here. I mean, really hard. I got good grades, dedicated thousands of hours to service to important causes, and I was a student leader. I'm ready. Yes, I'm on a full ride scholarship for students of color, but no, it's not just because I'm Black. It's not a handout. It's merit-based, and I didn't take a seat from anyone. So the "you took my spot" statement, which is a real statement, I can remember being in the classroom with the student who told me that. It hurt me for a long time. I mean, we're talking over a decade later, and I'm still reflecting on it. Please. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. So, Oh, yes, thank you.
Just asking exactly what happened in that classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. So in senior year, we were towards the middle of the year. So at this point, we're kind of coasting, senioritis. So we had a lot of talking in class. People shared where they were going, what was going on next for them. And I can recall, and I still know this student to this day, I told her, hey, I'm going to UW-Madison, right? And she, I guess, had also applied and was not accepted. And that was her response to me, was that I took her spot. So yes, absolutely. And I reflect on it now and I say it hurt me a long time because I struggled with this sense of imposter syndrome, right? Like, am I really supposed to be here then if that was your spot? And non-belongingness, right? So for me, implicit in that, now I know a microaggression was a belief that she deserved something that she had actually not earned. And simply because she was white, quite frankly. So the sting of her comment drove me, though. I would say I used it as fuel to work and improve my value. And I still struggle with that. I'm not saying it's good, but I'm having a very truthful, transparent moment to really prove that I deserve to be there, that I deserve to be here, right? I deserve to be in any space I am. So I didn't realize, though, at the time that what I was experiencing was a microaggression. I just did not have the language for it. I mean, now I've learned these things over the years. And a microaggression, as I share, is like this really indirect, subtle comment. It's typically unintentional, but it's discriminatory. And it's against typically a member of a marginalized group. Microaggressions, though, that's really misleading, right? It sounds like then it's small, but it has such a big impact. I recently heard someone compare microaggressions to death by a million paper cuts, right? It can feel really little, but they add up. And so the person who's on the receiving end, it is absolutely a macroaggression, if you will. Over the years, I've certainly experienced my fair share. I would say the one that has stuck out to me is actually, you're so articulate. That's probably the one I get the most. And on the other end of that, I mean, it's intended as a compliment, absolutely. Again, unintended as anything of pain or hurt. But I've actually never heard a white colleague called articulate. And I've been in spaces where we were leading together, and that was what was said about me. And so for me, it feels really rooted in this shock, in this, oh, I can't believe that you're intelligent, basically. And so I share a few more on the screen that I've heard commonly, especially working in this space. But as I transition, I will say UW-Madison was a wonderful decision for me. I'm glad I went. I was afforded really great leadership experience and exposure. It's such a big school, so there's just, again, for somebody who's as much of a busybody as me, it was perfect to go and have so much to put energy into. So I devoted time to diverse pre-health societies at the time. That was my plan. The Black Student Union, the All Strings Orchestra. I loved hearing the violinist this morning. That is my instrument. Best buddies, all sorts of things. I was able to intern back home. I would come back to Milwaukee in the summers at Marquette and at MCW, which I went on later to work there, and at the Blood Center of Wisconsin. My senior year, I spent a month in Uganda, which absolutely changed my life. And I was able to investigate health and nutrition in that country. But one of the most profound experiences was actually being a resident assistant or a house, we called them house fellows. So as you all may know, you live in the dorms, you're right in the thick of it, you're supposed to be there to help them in navigating young adulthood, if you will. So I developed programs and different things to get folks engaged, basically kind of D&I in a college environment. And I found immense value in this job, but it was really hard. It was very hard. And I found that I had to find this balance between, I gotta say policies and tell you what you can't do. No, you can't run around and drink and all, right? Like it was that. But then you wanted to build relationship and show people that you cared. By the time I finished, some folks call me their big sister. Some folks call me Mama Ashley, even though I was not older than them by much at all. But it shows you that I was able to build really deep relationships with my residents. But there were some residents who just did not like me. I don't care what I did, how I tried to build community. And one in particular really didn't like me. So as a resident assistant, you sleep really light because stuff goes on all the time, all night. You have to do rounds. And I remember one night, I heard what sounded like, for me, water trickling outside my door. And so I jumped up, nervous at what that could be. And when I opened the door, my resident, the one in particular I'm reflecting on, was standing there with his pants down, urinating on my door. Yes. I closed my door. Obviously, I was shaken. I went back in my room, mustered up the energy and the thought to call a coworker who was also available at that time. He came and helped. And I look back now, I really had no idea what was happening to me. I had no idea how to advocate for myself. I just kind of left it alone. The resident was required to write an apology letter to me that was absolutely hollow. You know, he's like, oh, I'm sorry. He doesn't like me. He doesn't care. He's not sorry. But he got to stay. He stayed the remainder of that year on my floor. And after that experience, I never felt safe again. Felt completely unprotected, felt looked over. Here I am working, doing my job, and being exposed to an assault like that. Like, it's just, right? It's like, how does this work? So I learned firsthand the power of privilege, and in this case, white privilege. I knew other students of color who had gotten kicked out for far less offenses than that. So privilege, again, so we're on the same page. And I'm trying my best to really simplify. Of course, there are folks who study these things and have written their whole dissertations. But very simply put, privilege is gaining benefits based on your social identity. You can't earn it. You get it. It's an automatic thing because of how you identify. I just decided to stay focused and graduate. At that point, I was a senior. I didn't want to shake up the system too much. I said, I'm getting out of here. And I look back now, and I often wonder if would I have dealt with it different now that I know about advocacy and how to stand up for myself. But I left it alone, and I share it with great vulnerability. I still feel myself shaking right now sharing it, and it was over 10 years ago, because I need people to know how real this is. So, dear white colleagues, I am tired. College nearly took me out. I need a break before jumping into graduate school. The rigor of science coursework and just trying to be a black student at a predominantly white institution is just too much. I interned here for 2 summers. I contributed to valuable research. I'm eager to learn, grow, and contribute. And no, I'm not a diversity hire. I started my first job, I was at MCW, as Reverend Trainer mentioned, after interning, and I started as an administrative assistant, got promoted over the years, and I thank my leadership at MCW so much for so thoughtfully pouring into me. But what I know is that many of my other colleagues, other persons of color, did not experience that same level of investment, and I felt like something was missing, right? So I started in global health, and I helped to build the Office of Global Health at the medical college, and over time got connected to diversity, equity, inclusion work, because I realized, like, hey, there's a gap here, like something is not working out. And I realized that gap often was inclusion. And so it's one thing to tell someone you're welcome, hey, we want you here. It's a whole nother thing to really show them by sharing authority, sharing power, sharing influence with underrepresented groups. So what inclusion looks like, and honestly, it's a laundry list, and I'm hopeful that we have plenty of time for Q&A and discussion too, but it's asking other people to speak first. It is noticing who is missing and inviting them to be engaged. It is changing our policies, our practices, our procedures. If I got $1 for every time I heard, well, there's a policy against that, and I'm thinking, well, don't people write policies? And of course, we have our boards of directors that have to vote on them and all of that, but aren't we in control of them, and shouldn't they actually be serving us? So I've I've grown to learn over the years through my own practice and I'm a discipline in this work that we have a lot more control over how people can show up and how they can thrive in our environments than we realize. And we all have spheres of influence. I've worked in very hierarchical organizations. As you shared, I work in a very large organization right now, but we all have leadership, and I always invite my colleagues, I'm like, even just the meeting you lead, you have power and influence in even just that space, even if it's not positional leadership we're talking about. But over the years, I've continued to challenge myself to learn and grow and to share in this space. D&I for me isn't just a profession, it isn't just a career choice, it is not just academic or strategic, it is life, it is a lifeline. And I've shared with you all some of my background and programs that have gotten me to where I am. And for so many members of marginalized groups, it just can't be an add-on. It can't be. So in recent years, I've seen a huge shift towards this conversation of equity and equality. I think it's pretty much been at the forefront right now. So the recognition is really that there's some gaps, right? Like we're not all in the same space. We're not all experiencing life starting at the same running mark, if you will. So I feel like that recognition of the gaps has been really transformative in this space. And I share on the screen that there is quite a bit of a difference between equity and equality. So equality, of course, is sameness. That's just giving everyone the same thing. But equity is saying, hey, wait, there's some adjustments we actually need to make because people have unique traits, they have unique characteristics, backgrounds, access to things, to make sure that everyone can actually participate and have full access. I actually have an image that I want to share. This is probably my favorite one right now, and I'm sure if many of you, since you're in this space, you may have seen some versions of this. I like this one because, of course, you see folks in the first picture to as far as left, no one can see, right? Like there's this huge fence. Sure, you can make out that there's differences in the folks, but at this point, no one can really see. And then you slide over, and that's equality. Everybody has a box that they can stand on that's the same, but we still see that the access to viewing this, and this is a construction site. I got this from W. Crew, Wisconsin. But it's still two people really can't see at all. And then, of course, now in this next one, we're making concessions for the fact that we have differently abled folks, and we have someone who needs a higher box. Like, we're getting there, right? And that, in this image, really it's about how do we take down the fence? How do we get to justice? How do we just stop the barriers altogether? And so I love that exploration, and I think that true equity is justice. And as people of faith, myself included, of course, it's part of our life's work, right? So please. Where the man, say it again?
In the middle right section, they show the disabled person and the woman higher than the man. Why?
Oh, that's a good, oh, in this one? This one right here?
Mm-hmm.
Slightly, I guess, yeah, I guess it depends on your perception of it. I don't know if that was intentional more than it was to make sure that they had what they needed to look over the fence, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I don't know. I think we could talk more, right? It's a tool for discussion, that's for sure. Absolutely. Yes, the goal, so it may not sound exciting for any of us, but this is a construction organization. So what they were implying is that they want to see this construction site, and they can't because of their differing abilities and access. No, I don't think so. Okay. Yeah, there have certainly been many renditions of this concept. And so I invite you, I love getting them. It's fun to kind of critique them and talk through what it shows us. So, yeah. Yes, please. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I have to remember the online too. Thank you, Reverend Trainer.
Heroic effort that has to be done for the disabled person and the woman to the man. Sorry. But compared to the man. And also, they're almost level now. And in the other three, they are not. So I thought that was real interesting how that is pointed out so visually, that in order to get people anywhere near being the same, you have to do more for certain groups in order to equal things.
Absolutely. Thank you for that reflection. Please, I'm going to give you a room.
So I've seen it up to number 3 panel. So thank you for bringing number 4 panel, because I never thought about just take the fence down or take the wall down.
Right?
So that was a good insight.
Yeah, I love it. So that's the conversation is now, like I said, to justice, right? Like, let's just get it, move all the hurdles. So yeah, and it's better for everyone, right? Like everyone gets to benefit from that. So active and consistent effort to use our privilege and power and to support and advocate, let me go back, sorry, and to support and advocate for people with less privilege. I say as an ally, and I appreciate this definition so much, is that you unite yourself with another to promote a common interest. So I devoted my career and really my life to this work and to this space. And I realized over the years that a lot of what was missing was allyship, right? So we talk about equity or justice. How do we actually get there is not by the marginalized groups doing it all themselves. It's just not gonna happen. And so I've challenged myself. I've been in a position to, in kindness, hold my colleagues accountable for this work as well. Dr. Kamara Jones, who she's a shero for me, she asserts that racism zaps the strength of the whole society. She says that, or as an ally in racial equity, you have to see the struggle as your struggle. It's not just the struggle of a marginalized group, people of color. It is our struggle as a society. So you must see that being complacent about racism and its deadly impacts, you are actually hurting yourself as well. So throughout the time today, I referenced a few excerpts from an article that I actually wrote last year. So it was during right after the murder of George Floyd, I was asked to write a reflective piece. And many of my white colleagues were asking me what they could do, right? Like they were just like, what can I do? This is just, if you all can put yourselves back in last summer, it was a different time, right? It was just, whoa. I can't speak for all Black people, and I never will. I invite you to get to know as many Black folks, as many folks of differing backgrounds and identities as you can. But here are some of my thoughts. See me. Presenting evidence that racism, forms of oppression exists, it is really painful and exhausting. Please don't discredit my personal experiences, and also the impact of slavery still is felt today and is not far removed from many Black families. I'd argue that slavery has evolved, exposed by the disproportionate number of Black and brown people in our criminal system. But like I said, we're not gonna go down on those conversations today. The second one that I would say is, this is complex and uncomfortable work. I mean, you all have committed to this space, but if there was an easy solution to fighting racism and other forms of oppression, I feel like it would have already happened, right? A focus on pursuing the learning and the education like you have, increased awareness, interrogating our policies, our practices, our procedures, all the things that we say are normal, and transforming our systems with bold changes, that's what's really essential. Protesting and voting and making change across every sector. You will be nervous, you won't get it always right, and you will make mistakes, but move forward in that humility and don't allow guilt to stop you. Plug in where you can and keep going. The last thing I'll share in this space is that it's not enough to be a racist, and I think to not be racist, and we heard this a lot last year, but you have to be anti-racist, and I would invite us to continue to think about being anti every form of oppression we can. As a Black woman, I heard a Black woman recently pose a question to a largely white audience, and she said, "What are you doing to make sure your children don't kill mine?" And it just kind of completely changed my perspective, and it's just not time to play it safe. We can't be silent. People's lives actually depend on our commitments in this space, our voices, and being thoughtful to use our privileges. I get an opportunity in this space to do a lot of learning and education. I was on a webinar on Wednesday of this week that was offered by Lean In, and Melody Dobson, the wife of George Lucas, was on there. It was just really cool, right? Like, anytime you can see someone like that talk. But some of the data that was shared said that 77% of white employees consider themselves to be allies. But then when you ask them what they're doing in that space, only 39% are activated, are doing anything of tangibility, if you will. So I've learned over the years that there's a few things about being an ally. First, it's not just the title that you can give yourself. It's not a, hey, I'm an ally. It is those groups calling you, the groups that you are not identifying with calling you an ally and identifying you. It is action, like I've shared. It's a verb, not a noun, and I tell people that all the time. You're going to be doing this forever. And then it takes humility, as we've talked about, but you don't have to invent the solutions. And I think some folks get stuck or frozen because they feel like they have to come up with something. But there are so many organizations, many that you all are connected to, who are doing amazing work, who know what it takes to change. And really it's saying, hey, I'm in this with you. I'm doing this with you. I see our connection and our unity. So as I've shared throughout my time, racism isn't new to me. I mean, at the age of 8, I was exposed to what it meant to integrate a school, and I've identified with a number of my colleagues who also have had really tragic experiences. I share with you all a painful experience that I had, right? And unfortunately, I'm not a rarity. It's an inescapable reality for so many people, and I recognize that some people haven't had to think about it at all. So yes, some days I'm hurt, I'm confused, I get frustrated and angry, but most days I'm really hopeful. And my journey has been both beautiful and painful, but I actually wouldn't change a thing, even some of the really uncomfortable things I've shared and have gone through. I'm grateful for resilience, for wisdom, and for Jesus, quite frankly, because I don't know how else. So I know that not everyone has opportunities like I've had, and that's what fuels my work. I end today by just sharing a quote from MLK Jr., which says the ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by bad people, but the silence over that by good people. That is all I have. I am welcoming any comments, questions, reflections. I also do have resources, so I will share the slide deck if that's something that would be useful as well. But, oh, sure. Thank you, Reverend Trainer. So last year, December, so almost a year ago, I got the bright idea to start a business during the pandemic. But, all of us were at home a lot. And it's a business that has probably been in my heart for many years on professional organizing. And I took the leap to do it. I started small with family. It grew really quickly, though. So by February, I had to get an LLC. And even with COVID precautions and all of that, it has been an amazing outlet for me. And I've used it as ministry. And so as a professional organizer, people trust me to come in their homes and to help them navigate their spaces that many of my clients have found to be overwhelming, and it's debilitating. And so my lens that I approach this, of course, through my equity work and my D&I work, it really helps. And then also through this lens of mental health. And I just believe so strongly that we should all be well. We should all be practicing self-care. It shouldn't just be this cliche. It should just be how we live. And I'm just grateful that I've been able to do that work. And so that's actually how I was introduced to Reverend Trainer through your wellness ministry. So I spoke to a cohort of your parishioners back in May now, I think it was, May or June. How to organize paper, right? Stressful, bills, all that stuff. So Yeah, thank you, Reverend Trainer, for that space. But are there any questions or comments? I said a lot. I talk fast. Is there anything you didn't hear? Any definitions you need clarity of? Anything?
Let me just emphasize again, please don't speak until you have a microphone.
Thank you.
Because we have quite a large audience on Zoom for these adult forums. So I know, you might be heard in here, but it's actually for our peers who are on Zoom today and all week long. So Seth, you've got a microphone. Nancy, right next to you.
Hi.
Nancy.
One of the things that I wanted to mention, because it's been a helpful thing for me, is that being a very introverted, shy person, it takes a lot of effort to extend an olive branch and it's taken me a while emotionally to adjust to the fact that just because you extend one, it doesn't mean it's going to be accepted the first time. And that isn't permission to give up. That this is a whole lifelong process of trying and trying again.
Are you
and trying
talking
again.
about being an ally?
Being
and
an ally.
establishing that?
That I think white people think a lot of times that, well, I tried that, and well, then it didn't work with them. And that's not life. That's not how I have found that it works. And so I want to encourage everybody, and also to encourage myself, that this is a process and you keep going.
So maybe address the discouragement of being an ally and trying it and then saying,
Yeah.
and quitting, because
Yeah, absolutely.
address that.
Yeah, I've certainly heard those reflections from some white friends, white colleagues saying, like, I don't even know what to say, is this all about being PC, And I have encouraged people that, like I said, it is hard work. It is. It is going to be work that there is no clear roadmap for, and every person is going to have a different orientation for how they would let you in, right? I am positioned to be very vulnerable in this space, right? I can share in front of, although you don't feel like strangers, but I've shared something very personal with you today, right? But there are many of my Black friends, my Black colleagues, who it may take longer to build that trust and that rapport. And to your point, it's marathon work. It's not, I want to get to this, I want to check the box off with this person and get to know them and let them know I'm here. It may take years. It may be the rest of your life building with certain people. But I always tell people I would much rather have that iterative kind of what feels like slow and steady progress versus nothing, right? Like, we know we don't want it to be how we are now, so it can only get better, even if the work and the olive branches and the outreach feels obsolete sometimes, right? I will also say in this journey, and this is for everyone who's in this space of justice work, taking care of yourself is so important. And I've heard people say that rest is such a profound form of fighting the system. And so there may be times where you're like, okay, I gotta re-up. I gotta reassess and kind of reconnect with how I'm approaching, said person. And then just humility, being able to apologize. I didn't get that right, sort of thing. I've had to share that with so many people. I apologize every day out of an authentic space because I just don't always get it right. So, yeah. I saw another hand. Oh, and another hand. Okay, you have the mic too.
My question is almost similar to Nancy's. You said that this work of equity and anti-racism is quite hard, very difficult. It's a lifelong thing. The issue is, just a question about fatigue. Sometimes you feel that those people who want to hear, who are willing to listen, they have already listened, they have already heard it. And those who don't want to hear anything, can make the drums, or do anything you want to do, but they're not going to be listening. And sometimes I feel that for those who want to hear, I'm like preaching to the choir. And for those who completely don't want to hear it, nothing I can do. So the issue of fatigue, how do you deal with that kind of fatigue?
Absolutely. So as I've shared with you all, I am a diversity, equity, inclusion practitioner, which means that quite often I'm responsible for helping organizations to reach strategic goals related to D&I. So at my current organization, that includes like representation. Because we're a hospital system, it includes how our diverse patients are experiencing our organization. It includes supplier diversity goals, right? So we have all these different things that we're holding our leadership accountable for. And I'm gonna tell you this, some of our leaders completely support it. I don't have to convince them. It is, what else can I do to support? And this is not unique to my current organization. I experienced it at my previous organization. And there will always be folks who are like, yeah, no, this is not important to me. I don't get why we're doing this. I shared some of those are some of the things I've heard from people, that it's a handout, or why are we doing that? You know, like those are the things that I've been faced with too. And I'll tell you what encourages me is I know that there will always be dissension. Like there will, in anything, right? There's gonna always be people who are like, I don't agree. I don't get why we're doing this. I don't find value in this. I have been encouraged by the folks who do, like you all, to come and to hear and learn and be in allyship. And I use that energy to get over those days where I'm like, the world is, you know, like we have those days. I meant